Call work session to order. Items for review and discussion.
Good evening. The first item that we have is the presentation of the comprehensive annual financial report for the year ended March 31st, 2021. Stephanie.
Okay, thanks. Hi. Mike Groshek is with Trout Beeman and Company, who is our external financial statement auditors, and he's going to lead the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you. We have completed your annual audit for the year ended 2021. The city has an audit to comply with its debt covenants and general accountability to the citizens. And I typically have come before you for many years to do a short presentation. I'll point out the highlights. Again, if there's anything you would like to stop and talk about, that's fine, or ask questions at the end, that's fine too. But I'll just go ahead and, in a brief, point out what I think you might find of interest. The first document I have is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. I'll go over that first. You have an introductory letter. You have your independent auditor's report on page 1. It's a clean opinion in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Then starting on pages 7 through about 19, you have the management discussion and analysis. That's where the city management puts in some layman terms or briefly describe some of the major financial events for the year. What were the major financial events for the year? Just before I get started here. Well, of course, COVID. Everywhere I go, it's COVID. Everywhere I've been, it's COVID. So it was no different here. But some good news is, really, your revenues were very steady. Sales taxes were up a little bit. You did have the public safety sales tax full receipts for the whole year. Property taxes had a slight increase with the assessed value and had a slight increase. And then you also had the CARES Act money, which was about $1.4 million. So revenues were very consistent with the prior year of 2020, but then you also had the CARES Act of about $1.4 million, so that's how you got approximately, in the general fund, $12.5 million in revenues versus $11.3 in the prior year. So revenues did well. There was no new debt for the city. You did have a few small capital leases, but basically you just made payments on your existing debts. Capital projects, capital spending was up from the prior year. About $13 million in the governmental funds versus 3.8 and 3.8 in the proprietary versus about $7 in 2020 and about 1.9 in the proprietary fund. Golf had positive operating results this year, and the solid waste fund also had positive rates this year. Water and sewer, you had your typical rate increases. You had about a 1% increase in rates in water and then about a 12.5% in sewer. And those had operating results, good operating results. Overall, this city, as well as everyone, staffing. Especially on the public safety side, policemen, firemen, everywhere. And on the national scene, this is a problem. You can't find people. Really, any business I work with, anyone I talk to, all of us are struggling with staffing at the moment. So that was no exception here. You did see it in your public safety because you were down about $900,000 from budget. Some of that was just because you couldn't fill positions. Park was probably hit the hardest by COVID because people don't want to go out and get into places like that at typical some points during the year, especially last year. Again, the assessed value held well, and there was no change really in the city's levies. So given the overall impact of COVID and the staffing you've been dealing with and the turnover you've been dealing with, really, I thought, from your perspective, 2021 was a pretty good year. Okay, I'll point out a few operating results. Why don't we go to the general fund, or the governmental funds first on page 26, and we'll talk about the general fund. That's probably the fund you're most interested in. Again, revenues, taxes were up from the prior year, and total revenues were up. You did have an excess of revenues over expenses of about $3.7 million that you added to the fund balance. The total fund balance at the end of the year was about $9.6 million. It was about $6.1 million last year, and as a percentage of expenditures, that's about 55% of expenditures, which means you could operate on your fund balance for over half the year just based on your fund balance if you didn't receive any revenue. Is that good, bad? Well, I guess that depends on your perspective. Just like on the personal side, you probably ought to have a few months in the set aside for reserves, be able to operate if you needed to. Certainly a couple months is good. How long after that? Some people go a lot longer, some people go somewhere in between. So again, it's a matter of philosophy. The city has had that stabilization requirement of 15% of the expenditures to keep in the fund balance, so to be there for an emergency time. This year was no different. Then after that, again, the park had some lower operating results because COVID, really it was on the revenue side. And then street projects, you did spend a little less than you probably had budgeted. Again, capital spending was up from the prior year, but not as much as you budgeted. And then on the proprietary fund side, starting on page 33, you have the 4 proprietary funds: sewer, water, golf, and solid waste. They all had positive operating results. Back at the front, on the governmental-wide statements on page 23 and 24, that's basically the consolidated statements of the city if you added up all the city's funds. And it presents it in the governmental and the business type sector, listing the assets. So there was about $54 million in cash between all the funds, $32 million in the governmental, $22 in the business. And a lot of that cash, again, in those separate funds are for specific purposes. Then starting on page 41, we have the notes to the accounting policies. Gives you a little more detail. Note 2, deposits and investments. The city is required to collateralize or secure all of its funds, either by FDIC insurance or by pledged securities. And that's state law on that. The city did comply with that requirement, and we really have never really had a problem with that at the city of Belton. That's one of those deals. It's never a problem until a problem. If banks start having problems, and that'll get a lot more. Would get a lot more scrutiny. Note 4 on page 63, capital assets. On the governmental side, you had about $13 million in capital spending increases, and on the proprietary fund, on the next page, on page 54, you had about 1.8. So a lot on the governmental side this year. Note 5 talks about the pension plans. The city is in loggers. Several pages of notes on that. And quite honestly, that's been bouncing around. Some years the market does well and the investments are real high, and so the liability goes down. And other years the market doesn't do well and the liability goes up. So again, it's and there are the state laws in effect how much could be charged if there was they can only charge or increase so much a year. But anyway, the city's been in that for a long time. Note 6 has the debt. Again, no new debt for the city. You're just simply paying on your old. You did meet all your bond covenants. You do have various reserve requirements. You do have a maintain insurance. You do have to meet a rate covenant. So you did comply with all your debt covenants. Conduit debt, you did have some new with the Chewy development. The city has had some really good economic development, of course, out there on the highway. And so Chewy, the city has approved issuance up to $70 million of industrial revenue bonds. Again, that's debt that's in the city name, but it's going to be paid by the corporation. Note 11 shows the tax revenues for the year, a breakdown between all the taxes the city has. And at the bottom of page 70, you have your assessed value, your levies. Then after that, we have some required information. Starting on page 90, we have the budget for the general fund. So we'll have the budget for the major funds first, the general fund, the park, the Belton Town Center TIF, the streets. And then further in back, you would have the individual budgets for all the other funds. And then finally, you would have statistical information. The city does prepare a comprehensive annual financial report, which generally means that you're presenting information on 10-year cycles and periods. And it does aid in looking at trends and seeing how the things have changed from a couple of years ago. Again, the city's presented a comprehensive financial report for many decades now. So basically, from the number side, again, it was a pretty steady year. COVID, it did have an impact. You did get some additional COVID funds, but your revenues held strong. You made your debt payments, you did some capital projects, and you're still trying to hire people like everyone else. Does anyone have any questions on any of the numbers or anything in general? And then just a couple other letters to go over. Yes, Councilman.
Yeah, did you have any interaction with the state auditors?
No.
Thank you.
They're generally, they do look at some financial stuff, but they have kind of a different scope in looking at things more. We're trying to get your financial statements for your bond covenants and show that you're meeting those requirements, and they've got another with the, although we have worked with them and run across them on many cities over the course of the decades. Yes.
I guess my question, and maybe you haven't got to it, is there anything in our systems that you see that we need to change?
There was just one, I'll get to that just in a second. Just before I got off the numbers,
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Again, it was a pretty good operating year. We do evaluate internal controls. We do point out items we note during the audit. The city has had items before, and in general, we've been very pleased with the city's internal control setup. Always like their policies and procedures. However, you have had, as a city, you've had turnover. You've experienced some systems changes, and so this year during our testing, just two things to point out. In what's called your report to management, timesheets. Again, we have a new system, new software, new employees, or fairly new employees, and did note that some timesheets were not being approved as required, as they normally have been in the past. And then on the federal wards, they did come out with and change the Single Audit Act and require uniform guidance, and then they require some policies you could have oral, now they want written, and so we just noticed some of those weren't written, so we made a comment there to go ahead and write those policies down. City was aware of that, and they also were aware they were having some weaknesses with their timesheets and timekeeping, so they had been aware of that anyway and been working on that to resolve that anyway. So we did point that out. Then also there is a letter called Communication to Those in Governance. After Enron and WorldCom, we're supposed to tell you that you had an audit. Of course, I come before you, so you know you had an audit, but apparently there was some times not everyone knew they had an audit. So we got to give a letter to the governing body telling you had an audit. If there was any significant difference with management, any significant difference in changes in accounting principles, really any significant difficulties we had, it would be in this letter. We didn't really have, outside of COVID, really there really was no other significant issues. Then you also have a copy of the year-end adjustments. Keep in mind, it is a big general ledger. Some adjustments are made for year-end reporting that you don't necessarily make to prepare to use for your statements during the course of a year. And then there are several entries that are also in regards to loggers. Again, that's more of a year-end entry. And then you also have a copy of the representation letter that was signed to us. So again, the records were in very good order. We received excellent assistance from the city staff. The city got all its financial reporting requirements taken and done on time for its bond reporting. Anything else I could help you with?
Anybody else have any questions at this time? I assume when we get home and read everything in this thing, we can call you or Sheila and have questions answered?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Appreciate the relationship.
Thank you. Item B.
The next item, Laura Ellis from the municipal court is here to go over the reports that you guys get in your packet each month. Laura, if you'd be more comfortable, you can sit at the table.
Yeah, I can't really, nobody gets in and I can't see you. Here, sorry. You're fine. Should have brought a step stool, I guess. Hi, I'm Laura Ellis with the municipal court. I'm going to talk about some of these reports. Unfortunately, one of the things that's happening with our switch to the state required software, which is called Show Me Court, the first two reports that you normally get will no longer be available. It's part of the system that we did. We asked for it. Someone at some point years ago asked for a detailed report. And so we provided that. They wrote it for us and gave you case disposition information so that you knew how the prosecutor, the court, the judge was performing, basically. So it gave you caseload of how many tickets were actually given to the court and filed by the prosecutor, and how those cases got disposed for the month, and how that money was collected and dispersed. Unfortunately, like I said, with the state system, the My Filed or Closed Case Listing report, which is probably the most beneficial to you, is no longer a thing. So we're not happy about that, but that's what they say we have to do. So what you will get is the Municipal Division Summary Reporting Form, and that's required by the Supreme Court, by every court in Missouri, to report monthly caseload information. So it does still tell you at least what type of cases were pending at the beginning of the month, how many cases were filed by the police department to the prosecutor that he accepted and filed the charges. It will tell you how many of them were trials, were found guilty, and how many were trials and found not guilty. How many were pleas of guilty in court, they just came in, pled guilty, or paid on their own. The Violation Bureau citations are citations that are just mailed and available without a court appearance to dispose of those cases on their own. If they were dismissed by the court for some reason, it could have been during a trial, it could have been a witness that did not appear or was not cooperative. The nolle prosequi is something that the prosecutor does when he usually works out plea agreements with attorneys. We don't certify any cases for jury trial here. We don't hear them, but we do send cases for jury trial to the county. Not very often, but we do that. And then the total case dispositions is what was disposed of after being filed. And then that gives us the total pending at the end of that month from what was filed, what we disposed of, and what is now pending. A trial de novo and application filed are cases that have had a trial. They were found guilty. They didn't agree with the finding and didn't like the finding, and so they appeal it to the next court, which would be the Associate Circuit Court at Cass County. We did not have any that month, but we do have quite a few a year. Those cases are heard there. The disposition is sent back to us. If they collect a fine or are found guilty, then they mail that money to us at the conclusion of their trial there. This information also lets you know the amount of warrants issued during the month, how many warrants had been served, and then the amount of outstanding warrants we have on hand at the end of each month. We don't handle parking tickets separately for this report for the state. Those are like metered parking, which we don't have, so that's always going to be a 0. The last page shows the actual disbursements and revenues that we collect and how each line item that they go to. We also have to file an excess revenue amount because with the Senate Bill 5 that passed, the city is capped at, is it still 20%, Sheila?
No, I think
it-
it's much lower. I think it's
12 maybe? Okay.
Yes.
It started at 20 and then they lowered it to 12. If it's a moving minor traffic by the state's definition, which is mostly just traffic and codes violation, they have a cap on how much can be collected and assessed for those. That money has to not equal more than the 12% of the general operating revenue for the city. We don't ever come close to that, but there are a lot of little towns that do. So we have to report that separately, even though we collect it all. If you were over the 20%, whatever over that 20% was, the city would pay that money into the state. So that first part is what we collected in minor traffic, just because that has to be separated. Fines are money that the city keeps. The clerk fee is $11, I'm sorry, and that is money the city keeps. The Crime Victims Compensation Fund is $7.50. The city keeps 37 cents. The state gets the other $7.13. Bond forfeitures are when someone posts bond to get out of jail, they get arrested on a warrant or a new charge that requires a bond because they don't feel they're going to appear. They fail to appear in court, they're given a notice, they fail to appear a second time, the judge orders a judgment on that bond and forfeits the bond, and that money goes into the general revenue fine account as well. The next set of those where other revenue are things that are more serious traffic. It's not speeding plates, it's criminal, driving while suspended, accident cases, a little bit more serious. And it's still the same breakout, but there are some things that this are not included in the state's calculation of their 20% overage, which would be the Judicial Education Fund, which we don't collect that. The Peace Officer Standard surcharge is a money that is kept, sent to the state, right? The post is sent to state, and then we get a certain percentage reimbursed back for police training. There's the Crime Victims Compensation Fund, again, split out, but that is the portion that we do not have to count for the 20%. The Law Enforcement Training Fund is money that we collect, and it is used only for police training, but we keep it. It's not a reimbursable. It's just money for the police training the city retains. The Domestic Violence Shelter surcharge is required by the statute, and it is paid out and sent to Hope Haven of Cass County for their domestic violence shelter. The Inmate Prisoner Detainee Security Fund is money that's used for the jail for identification purposes, so their fingerprinting machine, supplies, wristbands, so that they can identify who the person is. The sheriff retirement surcharge is no longer collected as of January 1. Restitution is any money that was ordered for any kind of damage or monies due that cost someone a dollar amount that the judge issued and ordered, and that someone paid us to pay out to the OE. We don't do parking tickets separately. They're just in the regular fines and fees because it's not metered. And then the bond forfeitures again. And then we have a DWI recovery cost, which is the cost that it takes the city to arrest on a driving under the influence of an alcohol or drug-related offense, and that is reimbursable back to the police department. And that is what that is. Is there any
Any
questions?
questions? Go ahead, Chet.
Just for clarification purposes, there's a court fee plus whatever speeding ticket or whatever the case might be. What does the court fee cost?
The actual total court cost, including the city and state portion of court cost, is $26.50.
So that's, okay, so the speeding fee is then added to the 26? Is that what?
Yes, it would be a general speeding ticket, 10 miles per hour over would be $50.50 fine, and then a $26.50 court cost, all of these combined to
So
$26.50.
that court fee goes split through all these different levels here?
Correct.
Okay. Just for my own interest.
Okay,
Thank you.
it's a little confusing.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Well, looks like most of this crime victim compensation fund goes to the state and not a lot to us. Do we get reimbursed, or do we get part of the state's money to
We get-
compensate the victims in Belton? Or?
We get 37 cents for every guilty plea conviction. Out of the $7.50 total charge, we get 37 cents of that.
Yeah.
It's really not earmarked to be paid out of anything. And the state has a fund where a person, if they feel like they should be owed victims compensation, they have to fill out a state form, and they file that through the state and are reimbursed actually through the state.
Okay, so it's a state program. Okay.
Yes,
Okay, so that's why most of the money goes there. Okay.
right, yes.
Okay.
And it's a long process, but it's on there, yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Item C.
The next item is the Baker Tilly executive recruitment. Baker Tilly actually sent us their proposal yesterday, and in order to do the search for the city manager, they are going to charge us $22,050. And that process, they expect to be completely finished with it by the end of March. And there, in the addendum, we sent out, it's kind of thick, the addendum is, but that has the proposal and the engagement letter that you will be voting on tonight. I don't know if you guys have any questions about it.
Any questions?
I mean, I guess my question to you, but I don't know if you can answer it. The period, it seems like it's taken a long time to get there. I just didn't know if 5 months seems awful long when, I know even when we got Public Works Director, it didn't take us that long. It might have, because we went back a second time, but I'm just trying to
They
figure
won't-
out all the times we used them. It didn't seem like it was that long. It was more
They-
of a 2 or 3 month process.
Sure, they want to make sure that they contact each council person and the mayor, make sure that they understand exactly what your goals are, what qualities you're looking for, and then once they have spoken with each of you, so that process, the process of interviewing you all will take some time, then they will actually do a brochure and advertise it. They want to make sure that there's sufficient time to be able to get a good response, so that you have several good candidates to choose from. And so they are planning on making sure that they don't rush the process so that you are, it's an important position and they want to make sure that the council and the mayor are happy with the quality of candidates that are brought back for your consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Joe? Oh. Thank you. Item D.
Chief Sapp has a presentation for you.
We've had a lot of questions concerning open burning in the city of Belton, and the cool weather this morning kind of shows you that we're kind of in that season, so people will be wanting to do that a lot more. So I wanted to give a quick overview of what the regulations are within Belton. We get our regulations basically through the International Fire Code. That's adopted through the UDC. You still can't look in the code and find out exactly what that is because the code is adopted by reference, meaning we've adopted a whole book so that somebody didn't have to retype a book.
Chief Sapp, can you stop for a second?
I can.
Can we actually get what you guys are looking at?
He's working on it.
I like Allison, but. Hi, thank you.
Good to go? So that's where it's adopted through, but you still can't actually read those guidelines, and so we kind of have to educate people, and we use, we have a flyer that we hand out. There are some minor amendments, so those are listed within there. Those are fairly inconsequential as it comes to open burning, but what is in there about open burning, I'm going to show you in this presentation. Okay, so I think I skipped one. Nope. So what you can burn seasoned firewood, limbs that drop in your yard and things like that. That's all folks can burn. What you can't burn leaves, other yard waste, trash. You can't clean the plastic off your copper. It has to be, everything has to be just a good seasoned hardwood. And years
Chief,
ago,
do you
and
want-
most of you guys, yes, sir.
Going back to your last slide, it said you can burn limbs that fall down and all that. Do you have to have it like in an approved container, or is it, can you have it on the ground, or do you got to dig a hole? Or what is the proper way?
That's my
It's
next
coming
slide.
up?
That's coming up.
I'm sorry.
And most of you can probably remember a time there was no open burning. And I don't know exactly when we started that. It came once we adopted codes, but I don't think it came through the first round. I think at some point after we adopted codes, we started to allow it. So we run into that a lot in the public. People call because they said they're not supposed to be doing that. First up is just portable outside fireplaces. That's your general commercial things you can buy at Target, Home Depot, anywhere else. It could be a chimney. It may have a spark arrestor, but it doesn't have it. Basically, the code says if this is what you purchase, you have to use it according to the manufacturer's guidelines. And you know where those went. They used it to start the fire. So some guidelines on when you use those, and they're just slightly different between this and an open recreational burn. So there is no permit that's required for this sort of recreational burning. Needs to be at least 15 feet from structures or combustible materials. Must be constantly attended to while you're burning. And then at least one portable fire extinguisher, minimum 4A rating, or other extinguishing agent. You can have a bucket of water, a hose, some sand, dirt, whatever. For your extinguisher, a 4A basically means it's equivalent to about 5 gallons worth of water, or it's a 5-pound extinguisher, kind of what you would consider your, if you consider mini, small, medium, and large, they're a small fire extinguisher. If it's not within a container like that, it's a recreational burn, and these are now allowed too. They just have to be contained within some kind of ring. It could be a self-built rock ring, cinder block. It could be something more elaborate like this. We have a lot of people around town who have built really nice block burn structures. Some of them are buried in the ground. Those are all also acceptable. There's a little bit difference. Pretty much this slide says the same thing, except for we increase the distance from a house, structure, or combustible materials to 25 feet. And really that's the only difference between the two. To kind of help contain this, they really can't have it more than 3 feet in diameter and 2 feet tall. Our enforcement, especially on this, and we get a lot of calls, especially this time of year, And sometimes that's because a person's legitimately not following the proper rules, or they're trying to clean up their leaves this time of year, which causes a lot of smoke and smell and problems like that. We generally try to get our enforcement, we want compliance through education. So that's what we'll do. We'll always go out and educate them first, see if they're going to have volunteer compliance. If the fire is such that it shouldn't be burning or they're using improper materials, then we'll go ahead and either allow them to extinguish it, and if they can't or won't, we use our equipment to extinguish it. And then if it's a repeat offender, which is honestly sometimes hard for us to track because we'll have, could be 3 different shifts out of 2 different stations, and so maybe one didn't know that the other went. But if we get a pattern where we're kind of noticing that, then we'll use the fire marshal's office. They can go out and speak with them, and if need be, we can end up issuing a summons for those sorts of things. How should you report it if you think there's a problem? And that could be because you're not sure or it just doesn't look right. If it's nothing that's an emergency, the 331-1500 through dispatch, they'll send us out. We don't go lights and sirens. We'll go look at it, evaluate what's going on, and then make a decision. And honestly, you're going to get a little bit different every time. We're not getting a tape measure out and going the 25 feet, but we look to see that it's safe, if it's far away, what they're burning, and things like that. If it appears out of control or you think there's an immediate danger, then by all means call 911 and we'll come a little bit faster and make sure that everything is okay. And so another thing to point out that I didn't say that's in there, dimensional lumber, treated or untreated, is also on the non-burn list. Has to be basically a fresh, it's a processed tree. You've cut a tree down, it's seasoned, you burn it. And if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Any questions?
Go
ahead.
I'll go back to my last question then. If you have trees, or you want it burnt in those little, I guess I'm looking at if someone had acreage, can they dig a hole and just burn it down there without having the rocks and all that?
That's a good question. So acreage is a little bit different. We're starting to lose we have a few of those within the city limits still. It depends on, we'd have to go out and look. They can apply for a special burn permit. And things like that nature would be if it's more agricultural, depending on how much land you have. They don't have to build a pit, but we would have to go out and evaluate that on a case by case. Same way when it doesn't really happen here, but if the high school wanted to do a huge bonfire for homecoming or something, that's a special permit. So that's handled completely differently. They issue that, we go out, educate them, and then we inspect before they burn.
So your education part of this, what is like the highest wind speed that you allow or want someone to burn in?
It's a good question. It's really not, that's not addressed anywhere. So part of it is the container too. It kind of depends if it's an open campfire versus an enclosed chimney. It kind of depends. But I think generally by the time you get, for DNR and outside training, 15 miles per hour is the limit.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chief Sapp. You bring great relief to me in my occasional burning.
All right, thank you. Item E.
Item E, Chief Lyons will be addressing this issue.
I was asked to look into permitting all-terrain vehicles, ATVs, recreational off-highway vehicles, commonly referred to as UTVs, and golf carts on public roadways. Our purpose tonight is to determine if there is interest in such an ordinance and what type of vehicles are we talking about. And so during my research into this topic, I looked at several different cities in Cass County and across Missouri. And to my surprise, there's a lot of statutes that allow for ordinance changes to allow these vehicles on streets, and I'll go through a little bit of that tonight. I learned through my research that the city of Raymore does not allow motor scooters or other motorized recreation vehicles to be driven on public streets, such as go-karts and ATVs, but they do allow golf carts. Peculiar allows ATVs and UTVs in the county, Cass County. You can drive those vehicles on public roadways as well. And I learned that some of the common issues reported by law enforcement in Cass County and other communities where these ATVs and UTVs were driven by persons, they encountered people that were not properly licensed and underage. They were operated at speeds higher than the posted speed limit, operated in a manner which was careless and imprudent on occasion, and they did have refusals to stop for law enforcement and fled from by utilizing the off-road capabilities of these vehicles. And as a result, I believe that there were some elements that I think are essential to add if we did consider an ordinance, and I'll go over that in just a minute. But when it comes to the definition for an all-terrain ATV, it is any motorized vehicle manufactured used exclusively for off-highway use with unladen dry weight of 1,500 pounds or less, traveling on 4 or more non-highway tires. When it comes to ATVs, any ordinance, I would suggest that it stick with 4 wheels as opposed to 3, because 3 wheels have been taken off the roads because of safety conditions. You do see them, but those are older ATVs. And so typically with the ATV, you have a seat designed to be straddled by the operator, and sometimes you can even have room for another person on it. The width is about 50 inches or less. This is a definition that we found actually in the revised statutes of Missouri, and I have the citation and notes that I provided. A recreational off-highway vehicle, commonly referred to as a UTV, is a motorized vehicle manufactured and used exclusively for off-highway use, and which is more than 50 inches, but no more than 80 inches in width, and measured from the outside of the tire rim to the outside of the tire rim on the other side. And the dry weight is about 3,000 pounds, and they travel on 4 or more non-highway tires. And they also have commonly used for access to ATV trails. A golf cart is a motor vehicle which is designed and manufactured for operation on a golf course or sporting or recreational purposes that is not capable of exceeding speeds of 20 miles per hour. And that's a good point of differentiation between UTVs and ATVs, which can go over many posted speed limits and can approach up to 60, 80 miles an hour if you have certain models. The state of Missouri also defines a neighborhood vehicle which as a low-speed vehicle or golf cart, which is motorized under 3,000 pounds and cannot exceed 25 miles per hour. And that's more of the more elaborate golf carts that you see with bigger tires, maybe a little bit more power for the vehicle. And those are the types of vehicles that are golf carts and neighborhood vehicles are allowed in Raymore. With those types of vehicles, you do have restrictions on low-speed vehicles that they cross highways at perpendicular. They would not be driven on a state highway or an interstate. They would have to pass over it at a perpendicular and stay on city streets. And that's an important distinction between the other 2 types of vehicles. Some of the initial components, if we decide to go the route of ATVs, UTVs, or even golf carts, I would say that we need to insist that the valid state operator's license or chauffeur's license by the people operating the vehicle, by the driver, and that persons receiving a city permit to operate these types of vehicles on public streets may not be unlicensed or underage to operate the vehicle on public streets. I believe that ATVs and recreational off-highway vehicles shall be operated, and I would like to see it restricted somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 miles per hour. So if it was in a 40-mile-an-hour zone or 45, it would be restricted to 30. Golf carts, by their very definition, are already restricted and can't exceed certain miles per hour. I also believe that the city permit should be immediately revoked under certain circumstances, and this is one of the things I did not find in other ordinances. If, like say for instance, 2 violations within a year for violating traffic ordinances, I believe that that should be revocate the city permit. Maybe even penalties for not stopping for law enforcement should be considered as as a point to revoke the permit. And I think that the third thing is if the vehicle was operated while the driver was under the influence of alcohol or illegal substances, I think that ought to be an automatic revocation for 1 year. And so when it comes to the permitting process, the police department could facilitate this through our records unit window. The permitting process, I'd like to keep it somewhere in the neighborhood of business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And it would include an application, a check form for us to inspect the vehicles. We do have some examples of ordinances where even a go-kart has to have certain features on it. And so I listed in my memo that a safety inspection would be at minimum brakes and brake lights operational, at least 1 headlight or tail light operational. And you might be surprised at 1, but that some of these vehicles just come with 1. Parking brake, if equipped, rear view mirrors functional if equipped, and then confirm that it has at least 4 wheels. And then if it came to an ATV, one of the things that we did see in ordinances is because they travel at higher speeds, was that even state statute, and I made the citation there, requires a bicycle safety flag on top of it to bring attention to it. And then lastly, I believe that any of these vehicles should, the owners of it should have proof of financial responsibility in case it was involved in a wreck. I'll entertain any questions that you might have.
Go ahead.
I don't know if I have a question, Chief. I mean, it's great information you brought along. Me personally, I think I'd rather keep it at 25 miles an hour lower. I don't think I want North Scott to be up and down with golf carts because it is a 35 mile an hour zone, but I think these would be something good for neighborhoods. We have new neighborhoods coming in. I think people being able to drive to a friend's house or something without getting in a vehicle is fine, but I just don't want these, especially on the big arterial streets and people getting clogged up with these type of vehicles would be my recommendation.
Go ahead.
Chief, you weren't here, but I have some of the problems too. It's been several years back, but we had, they were out in the county and running their 4-wheelers, ran through a stop sign and did not turn out good. Of course, they were racing in the process. And I'm not opposed to it. I think you said something about licensed. We're not talking about a state license, we're talking about a city license here? No, what are we talking about?
It would be a city permit that they would seek.
City permit
Yeah.
and be approved, apparently I'm not doing very well here, had to be approved by the police department that they have the lights and the tail lights and whatever have you. Does that require a seatbelt as well?
Some of these vehicles don't come with seat belts. So when you get into like a UTV, sometimes they have seat belts, a lot of them, but an ATV does not. I've not been in a golf cart that has a safety belt, but I'm sure maybe there is something there.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't mind pursuing that. I think we may make sure we have the safety features in place. So, anyway, I'm done. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I brought this up for a resident back in the spring, they were concerned about UTVs, and you say that you prefer an ordinance similar to the city of Raymore, which only allows golf carts and low-speed vehicles, but you're just saying the form may be like Raymore's, not that you would outlaw UTVs, correct? Or
No.
I know it's us that makes the decision, but your recommendation was what I'm.
Yeah, when I looked into this, I didn't think any of them was lawful on the street, so I was surprised. It's been 6 years I've been out in the state of Missouri, but coming back, I found it. But yes, you're right. In regards to ATVs, I have a stronger opposition to those just because they travel faster. UTVs have a lot more safety features and generally are driven in a safe manner, and safer manner, and golf carts for that matter as well.
Well, and I agree with the speed restrictions, and also I got a copy of Raymore's ordinance, and they do require seat belts. Like I said, they only allow golf carts and low-speed vehicles, so they require seat belts in golf carts. And another thing I like that I think Peculiar and Pleasant Hill have is requiring head protection for anybody 16 or 18, under 16 or 18, I don't know, depends on the city, I guess. But again, I think that's an also good and safe requirement. But I just don't want to go back to the residents and say, well, we're not considering UTVs. UTVs are still in the, unless we finally rule them out, they're still in the mix. And so,
Yeah, I'd have to research head protection because you might run into
Yeah,
opposition with the law that passed a couple years ago.
Okay, thank you.
go ahead.
Chief, I think I've read all these rules and stuff, and it's very good input, and I think we should have this. The popularity of these things are becoming enormous, and down at the winery, we're getting them by the tons all the time now, and I spent a lot of time talking with them coming in there. Some of these people have spent up to $30,000 for these things, and I think you're going to have a problem if you're going to limit 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on them. If you're going down Y Highway with this thing at 25 mile an hour, you're going to get killed by somebody. I do disagree with limiting it to 30 mile an hour on the UTVs. But other than that, I have been told that some of the people in Peculiar were told that they can ride them on any roads that have a letter in them, but not with a number. I didn't see any thing in the rules here that distinguish what roads it could be on. So I suppose that the numbered ones are state and the lettered ones are county or something, such as Y or J or something, or C highway versus 58 highway or 71.
Yeah, I don't recall that, but I'll look specifically for that.
That would be kind of a good.
Well, I think you mentioned if you can cross a state highway, which is Y Highway, but you can't ride on Y Highway if we adopted
Well, what I've
the
been told is
recommendation.
that they can, if it's a letter, if it's a number, they're not
Oh,
supposed to be on it.
in Peculiar,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
peculiar. Okay.
So, it's a good source of revenue for the city. Good source of revenue for the city, and it could bring
Sure.
in a lot more revenue. So, that would be my one comment, though.
Is everybody okay with this moving forward? And are you okay with limiting just to golf carts and UTVs? There you go.
Yes.
Thank you.
Move forward. Thank you. Item F.
Dave Clements will talk about proposed UDC amendments.
Thank you, Sheila. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on September 20th and is recommending approval of a variety of amendments to the Unified Development Code to the City Council. and I'm going to briefly summarize those for you. Just to start from the top, the Planning Commission considered and looked at recommendations to create provisions for accessory dwelling units in residential districts, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. The Planning Commission also is recommending approval to require posting of public hearing signs as notifications with rezonings and special use applications. Planning Commission also recommending revised language for sidewalk location and design in 3 different sections of the code, and also looked at a proposed amendment to the fee charged for the Marquee Regional Detention Basin. So let's talk a little bit about that accessory dwelling unit recommendation. This was actually initiated by a resident in town who wanted to build a cottage at the rear of their lot for a family member. And that's exactly what an accessory dwelling unit is defined as. It's a self-contained living unit having a kitchen, bedroom, and bathroom that can be called granny flats, elder cottages, or secondary dwelling units. And they can be for family members or could just be rental property for additional income for a resident who wants to age in place in their home. They can be located within an existing building, or they can be newly constructed cottages on a lot, provided you meet the setback requirements and the lot coverage criteria that are part of this recommendation. So that then generally describes an accessory dwelling unit, and I'm sure you all have seen those in some circumstances. The city of Raymore has similar provisions, although it's never been implemented to a great degree. The city of Grandview is working on an overlay district that creates provisions for accessory dwelling units, and Lee Summit mentions it in their comprehensive plan, but has not amended their code to allow it to go forward. Planning Commission is recommending approval of those provisions for accessory dwelling units, and there are some standards as a part of that. The accessory dwelling unit has to meet all the regulations of the zoning district in terms of setback, lot coverage, and separation from other dwelling units on the lot. There is a limitation on the size of the accessory dwelling unit and the height of the unit. It also has to be on a permanent concrete foundation and meet all requirements of the building code. Now that, I think, is important because it makes a distinction between accessory dwelling units and what a lot of people call tiny houses on wheels. So we are looking for something that's going to be a permanent structure on a slab. And the accessory dwelling unit obviously has to have an address and provisions for off-street parking. So that then summarizes those provisions for accessory dwelling units. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that, or I could continue on these other bundle of amendments.
Continue.
I will continue, thank you. Planning Commission is recommending creating provisions for a public notice sign. The City Council might recall that this came out of a council directive earlier in the year. The purpose of this is to provide more notification to the general public about rezoning applications and special use applications. I did prepare just a mock-up of a sign that's in your agenda packet, just to kind of see a sample of what we're talking about. Did you see that? It was a yellow sign with red letters. We just wanted it to be something that would kind of grab the eye. It's proposed to be 3 feet by 2 feet, so it's going to be more than just a small little snipe sign. And on the black line, we would simply write whatever the case might be: rezoning to retail, rezoning to multifamily, or special use for a kennel. That would be written right on there. We want to keep the information simple, easy to see at a glance, and there is reference to the existing email address for projects@belton.org and a direct phone number to my desk, so anybody who sees that sign and phone number could call me directly to get the information about an upcoming application. There are some provisions here as to when the sign does get posted. They have to provide proof of the posting prior to the public hearing. And of course, we're asking them to take it down when the public hearing's over. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about that recommendation.
Go ahead.
I guess my question on this is just, it seems weird that we're required to send letters 15 days, but you're making a sign for 20. Why aren't those the same?
They should be. Let's make them 15.
Huh?
That should be the same, yes, sir.
Okay, so the one here should be 15 and 15?
Right. That's-
Okay.
The statutory notice is 15 days, and we probably just took a model ordinance, and I didn't make that catch, so thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, continuing on.
Continue.
There are 3 sections proposed for changes in the Unified Development Code pertaining to sidewalks. And working with Councilmember Powell, these pertain to connectivity, pertain to keeping sidewalks clear and unencumbered for access, and pertaining to connectivity and location of sidewalks and sidewalk width. Relatively minor amendments. They don't change anything substantial in the code, just provides a little clarification. Be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Powell helped author these requirements, so we could direct some questions to him if there's something that we need to.
Go ahead.
I'm thinking of a project been approved. This is a short distance from the front door to the street. So I'm parking my car there and somebody comes parks behind me. It's gonna go right across that sidewalk. I'm sorry. Yeah. The 2 cars will cover up the sidewalk because of the short distance between the 2 of them. Yet if you look at the street is not wide enough really to park on the street either. Like I said, the street was not really wide enough for parking on the street and safely passing it. And yet at the same time, parking in the front of the house is a problem as well because of the extension of the house and the car to the sidewalk. I don't have a solution. I just bring it up.
Well, yeah, that's something that we have seen in some planned unit developments where we get reduced front yards and narrower streets, that kind of thing. And I know that the city council's been critical of that in the past, and we try to get auxiliary parking, guest parking to reduce parking on the streets. But if somebody does overhang a sidewalk, that's a violation. They can be ticketed for that. So that exists now in terms of our ability to enforce that if we do get a complaint.
Okay, thank you.
And lastly, pertains to the code makes provisions for a impervious acreage fee charged for participation in the Marquee Regional Detention Basin. And the code requires that be updated annually. It has not been updated annually, so this amendment brings it up to speed, raises the impervious acreage charge from $5,100 to $5,900. So kind of a catch-up that we're doing there.
Go ahead.
Since we put that in, has anybody ever done a test or a measurement about how deep that is? I'm thinking about, do we need to dredge that thing out? No.
We'll let Greg answer that.
Greg?
To answer your question, no, I have not measured the depth of that.
I'm just kind of curious if with the dirt washing in, which is typical of any rain kind of thing, yeah, I just wonder if we need to be looking at that as I may not need to be done. I have no idea.
It may need to be done, I have no idea.
I agree with you. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Well,
Go
just
ahead.
one,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
hate to correct Dave because he's always right, but we did skip one, and that was about residential driveways being concrete, or the extensions across, and that really wasn't part of the sidewalk thing. But
Yes, I was just trying to be brief. This is relatively minor. Presently, our code requires a hard surface driveway on private property, but the code does not call out and state that the area of the apron or the approach from the pavement width to the property line shall be concrete. Now, that is a requirement or our standard specifications for Public Works. Public Works does require a concrete apron or an approach from the pavement to the property line to tie in with that concrete or asphalt driveway. We're just codifying that and making those consistent.
Anybody else? Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
My only comment is going back to your sign, I think that's gonna be a great addition. Instead of trying to mail out more letters, I think if more people want to know what's going on, they can be informative, and I think that's, I've been wanting that for a couple of years, so I think it's good that we're doing it. So, thanks, Dave.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. Item G.
This is Greg. He will be talking about the next 4 items. So, starting with Route 58 and Powell's multimodal traffic relief project this time.
It's got this wonderful name. It's got this wonderful name of Multimodal Traffic Relief Project Design. Most people just refer to it as 58 and Powell, or a lot of people refer to it as Peculiar Drive Project. Any of those names fit, and it's basically working on the bridge, or our approach to the bridge from the west side. And so this project, you'll see in the agenda tonight, there's a supplemental agreement for our designer. A lot of effort was spent by the city before I came here of figuring out what design we should use. We got a grant through the state, and the only requirements in that grant was that we remove Peculiar Drive, and then we have lanes that go all the way up to the ramp. And so a lot of work was done, how the connection should be, how it should look, what should be done. And so I was asked to give a brief little update on what's going on. This is kind of an overview of the whole project. It's 2 different segments, and I'll just zoom in so you can see the 2. This is the north portion of the job. So at Powell Road, we will be adding deceleration lanes as you head eastbound. So if you're headed toward McDonald's, you'll be able to go off into a right turn lane and then turn south into Powell Drive. That lane will continue then all the way to the ramp, and so that will then exit at the ramp, and that'll give 3 lanes in eastbound. As you're headed westbound, when you come off the southbound ramp, you'll be able to make a right turn and continuously move to Powell Drive. There'll be a continuous lane now from there to Powell Drive. You won't have to stop. I know people will end up stopping at the end of it, and they'll be looking, and they'll want to cross lanes, and so there will be some congestion from people doing that maneuver. At the same time, we'll be placing islands from the ramps all the way to Starlight. Starlight will not be blocked. That's the intersection that Chipotle and Canes is at. That intersection will remain open at this time. We will be cutting off Peculiar Drive, and it will stop at the last entrance into the shopping center. The south portion of the job was known as Cunningham. It's now will be known as 173rd Street. 173rd Street will continue from Mullen Road all the way over to Peculiar Drive. To encourage people who are coming from the south to use Mullen Road, the road will have a radius to it and turn from Peculiar Drive to 173rd Street. Peculiar Drive will then to the north be perpendicular into it and will have a stop sign. The road will then continue west on a new alignment that will be constructed through the Dean property, and Cunningham then will be turned south and teed into it. This will leave the most developable property on both sides of 173rd Street for the future. This will allow someone who's coming north on Peculiar Drive to go to Mullen, take Mullen north, and be able to make a left at Mullen onto Route 58 and head west. If you continue north in Cunningham, Cunningham will have an island at it, so you'll feel free to make a right turn there, but you will not be able to turn left. If you're on Route 58, you'll be able to turn left both directions, but you will not be able to make a left turn from the side roads. Right now, if you're at Cunningham or on the shopping center side of that entrance, during a majority of the day, you cannot make a left turn out of there. So it's not really that much of a restriction. It is a location we have accidents at, so it's good that we move those people back to 58 and Powell. When we do the improvements at 58 and Powell, we're actually going to move it where there's 3 lanes exiting instead of 2 lanes to get more volume out of that one traffic signal. So there'd be 1 less traffic signal between Powell and the ramps, and we'll have more access on Powell to hopefully move traffic better. And so that's the basic project. The schedule that we're on, we're trying to attain an A date. That is basically a date that we're allowed to acquire property. Once we achieve that date,
will then be able to get all easements in 2 partial tracks. That could range from 1 month to 9 months. We'll at that same time be finishing our final plans. We'll get MoDOT approval and permission to bid the job. We are on a schedule where we have to, by contract, be done by September 1st. Then we'll bid the project and start construction of the job. And so the job will last into 2023. That's all I have on it. If anybody has any questions?
Go ahead.
I guess my question to you, Greg, what's gonna happen with those additional lanes? Making sure we have our sidewalks, and are we gonna have a breakdown lane still over there, or will that go away because of those additional lanes on, turning into McDonald's or going all the way up to the highway to turn right? Isn't there a breakdown lane right now, then the sidewalk?
There's a little bit of a shoulder there, and we're pushing it all out, so it'll remain the same, so we can add a lane there.
So we'll still have sidewalks and all that there?
The sidewalks will remain, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Councilman Savage.
The Dean property, that's always been in some communications, sometimes on, sometimes off. Where are we at with that? Does that look like it's something that's gonna be, we're working together or no?
Because this is a federally funded project, I am not allowed to speak to anybody about property until I attain an A date or an acquisition date. After I attain an acquisition date, I then am free to speak to the property owners.
Thank you.
Sorry.
We've spoken to them a few times.
Anybody else? Any questions? Oh, I assume Allison would chime in if she does. Allison, do you have any questions? Is she gone?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't. Thanks for checking. I'll wave at you guys if I do.
We can't see you right now.
And that's because
There you go. Okay.
Greg has a black screen in between his 4 presentations, so
Okay.
that's why you couldn't see her.
All right. All right, item H.
This is talking about the America Rescue Plan Act of 2021, the ARPA funds. We have actually received our first distribution, and so we want to come to council to talk about what we can use these funds for, and then we will be, based on your feedback, preparing budget amendments for this current fiscal year, and then when we get our second distribution, well, we'll plan for it in next year's budget, so.
So I'm going to make a brief presentation on the ARPA plan. I've had the privilege, you might say, of attending several seminars, reading a lot of literature that has come out from the federal government about the use of ARPA funds. ARPA was started on March 11th when the president did sign the bill, and it did send a lot of money throughout the nation. They'd come up with the rules on how the money could be spent, even though it was approved back in March. It took them to July to determine, here's what we're actually going to spend it on. Then they had to send it out to everybody to get public opinion, then put the public opinion back together with the rules, and then they came up with a final ruling. So the Treasury Department came out with the final ruling, and it covers these 7 areas. They can support public health response, address negative economic impacts, replace public sector revenue loss, premium pay for essential workers, water and sewer infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, and equity-focused services. So I'm just going to run through these really quick on what we can and cannot do. So that kind of runs backwards. So the first one, equity-focused services. These are services that you already provide, and for our case, the city doesn't provide these equity-focused services. These are all provided by state and county agencies. So it's not something that we would have the opportunity, even if it was a desire to do it. That is not something that is allowed in the bill. The second one is broadband infrastructure. We have private companies that provide that service to our city. We do not actually provide that. There are some cities in the nation that actually do provide broadband services to their residents. Replace public sector revenue loss. The Treasury Department actually has a formula that you have to use, and you have to fill it out exactly the way they say to fill it out, and based upon their formula, we are not allowed to use anything to replace revenue loss. Address negative economic impacts. Once again, that is a state and county function. This is if a business is losing money or lost money, and it's mainly focused toward businesses and their losses. The state has plans set up for that, and they would distribute the money they receive for those type of work. And the last one is support public health response. Now, this is supposed to be for vaccines, for providing mental health to those who are suffering depression because of COVID, or it can be used for us if we wanted to buy masks or something like that. The only thing about this is when you use federal dollars in this case, these are going to be highly audited dollars. These dollars were just distributed last month. And there's already people who have been audited and are already in severe trouble and having to repay the funds because of misuse. So if you use money to say, hey, we bought some masks last month, let's get those paid for, you're going to have to show receipts. You're going to have to show exactly who used it, when they used it, how they used it, and every last little detail. Just like at some point people only used it for, well, this ambulance went on a COVID run to pick up this patient, took them there. Well, they're going to actually have to have all the documentation of what vehicle it was, what was the cost of it, and every little detail to get that money back. So it's really nothing, it's not really set up for us. It's set up really for the vaccines and paying for vaccines and that type of work. And those healthcare workers. Also going to be used for some hospital work and those type items. So really for us, it comes down to premium pay for essential workers, which is basically everybody at the city was an essential worker. We all had to deal with something to do with COVID. We all had to deal with people and that type of work, and water and sewer infrastructure. So the recommendation the staff was making is that we were going to issue $1,000 to every employee. And again, remember, this money is coming from the federal government and is not coming directly from the city of Belton. It'll just be through the city of Belton to the employees. The second recommendation is we look at water and sewer work. We can basically do water line work. We can also do our pumps or tanks that we have, or we can do sewer work. We can replace lines or do work at the plant. So to start out, the first year we would look at doing water line work, and depending on how the price of that would come out, it'd be somewhere between 6,000 or 7,000 feet of lines. So we started prioritizing lines that we want to work on. So I know this exceeds what the dollars are. I understand that. But we just wanted to kind of give you an idea. This is where we're starting and where we want to go. There's 2 remaining lines downtown that we'd want to work on, and that would eliminate all cast iron downtown. There's 2 streets on Lawrence and K that are in the northeast area that have significant water breaks on them, water main breaks. And then we have a list of little pieces of water lines that are not being replaced by Hargis Lake. And we want to get those finished up so when we pave those roads, we don't have to go back and cut those roads open to get to those water lines. So that area would be finished. And then we went back and said the water lines in the northeast area is the other group that we have the most breaks and most problems with. And so I made a map that just basically shows the areas we'd work in. And like I said, most likely on this list, we can only get down to Hillcrest, but it gives you an idea where we would start. And if for some reason, the high price of PVC comes down and becomes low, and we can do more work, we'll do more work. If it stays high, we'll do less work. But it gives you an idea of where we start and where we stop. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have with that.
Go ahead.
This is a one-time amount of money. That's not repeating itself.
It's actually 2 times we'll receive money this year and next year. The sum of money we're supposed to receive was divided into 2 payments.
But it's a one-time
One-time shot.
one-time
One-time
shot.
thing.
Yep. Thank you.
And we ended up getting 4.3 million total.
It'll be closer to 4.6 probably.
So when you say we can
Our
only do
first-
Hillcrest, that's what the first payment is what you're saying?
Correct. For this first group, we'd go down to Hillcrest. Next time, we'd also recommend doing some sewer work in a couple locations. We have backups and some work at the plant.
But no stormwater with this money.
No.
We are not eligible to do stormwater with this money.
Okay.
Go ahead, Perry.
I know it says you eliminated the items there that it cannot be used for. Economic impact was one of them, and I understand you say that could apply to someone has a business out here. It doesn't apply to us at the county or state or fed. But how about what the auditor just talked about in the Parks Department here in Belton, who had a terrible year because of COVID? Suffered an economic impact. Could that not be addressed?
It cannot. So the regulations are directed to a loss in general revenues. And our general fund revenues did not decrease. So that's the only way that you can use ARPA funding to replace
So the Parks is exempt
lost
from-
revenue. There are two funds that suffered negative revenue during COVID. One was the Park Department, Park Fund, and the other one was the Hotel Motel Tax Fund. But neither of those funds would qualify, and that is because the federal government did very strict, specific guidelines that the formula only applies to general fund revenues.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question. Can y'all
Go
hear
ahead.
me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, the public health response piece, I know it sounds tricky in terms of like showing our work on that, but would parks increase maintenance costs for people using trails and spending more time outside have any avenue for some reimbursement there? 'Cause the numbers I heard most recently from parks is that they're operating down about $95,000, 2019 to 2021. So I just want to make sure we rule out any options to kind of help them because of the increased use and maintenance costs during the last 2 years.
I'm just going to say that is all going to depend on the council's risk aversion. I believe that the risk of having to pay back funds are very high. I tend to be pretty conservative anyway, so maybe my risk aversion is a little bit less than yours. The council will end up getting to make that decision. I would not recommend it. If the council would like to transfer money to the park fund, I would recommend looking at general fund revenues or something like that. I would not recommend using ARPA funds because the audit risk is so high.
I would agree with Sheila on this. One of the things that I think of is, and I know they've lost money over there, but I also think the increase in our taxes over the last year and with Chewy now selling and distributing out of our facility, I'd like to hold off on doing any of that stuff until we kind of see the impact of that over the next 3 to 6 months on that. So I'd like to see the impact of what we have brought into our community to see how it affects them in the near future.
And please know that I'm not recommending that the park doesn't get funds. I'm just recommending specifically with regard to the guidance and the law not to use ARPA funding.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. I appreciate the additional context around that. Going to the park meetings and kind of hearing their concerns, I just have to, I have to speak up and just make sure we're turning over every stone for them. So thank you.
Anybody else?
Mayor, was that a request for the 1,000 per employee, or is that just done, or?
It would be up to the council.
Go ahead.
What, Sheila, what would that amount be, the total amount?
$1,000 for each full-time employee. We have 218 full-time positions. It will be we would have to pay FICA, and then we would also have to pay workers' comp. So it would be of around $250,000.
Go ahead.
Mayor, I would be in favor of that. It's been quite a year, 2 years for everybody, and that would be a good thing out of money we're getting from the feds anyway.
How's everybody thoughts on that? Good? You guys good with that? There you go.
We will bring
Bring that back.
a
All right.
budget amendment to the next meeting.
All right. Item I.
This is the wastewater treatment plant aerator replacement.
So in your agenda this evening, you'll see a task order to replace an aerator at the treatment plant. And I know you're all excited about this. So what is an aerator? Aerator, you just read the first line to get more than enough. An aerator is the process of adding air into wastewater. So if you ever had a fish tank and you stuck the little bubbler in there and the bubbler put air into your fish tank, that's the same exact thing that we do. This is a picture, just basically shows it.
Hold on. Andrew. Go ahead.
So, well, there's the definition for you. So that's just adding air into wastewater. And so basically you can see we have 3 of them here. One of them's not on. The middle one's operating properly. And the one that's to your right is not operating properly. You can see that probably a third of it isn't on, and then on either side is about every other or every third one is actually operating. This is a critical portion of our treatment plant. Placing air into it actually helps the process of the microbes eating the waste, and it reduces the amount of ammonia that is in the waste that comes off. This is very important because ammonia is one of the areas that we are graded on by Missouri DNR. And actually in the month of August, we did not meet the levels of ammonia. We exceeded it. And so we had a self-report, and we're still waiting for a report back from DNR on what they're going to say about it. And so tonight we have a task order on there to replace that aerator. Be happy to answer any questions you have about it.
Seeing none. Next.
Next is.
I guess my only question is that a budgeted item or is that something new that we gotta find money for?
It's a budgeted item.
Next is talking about the Bradford Place traffic study.
So Bradford Place, we were asked to take a look at it and look at the speeds that people are traveling. Bradford Place is basically looking at Bradford Lane and Given. As people said that as they're walking that area, that traffic was going exceedingly fast. So we actually have a device we put up, this little black box. You probably don't even notice it, but we mounted it on telephone poles or streetlight poles. People drive by it every day, and they don't even know that we're recording your speed, how many cars go by, and the size of your vehicle. And so we set it up both on Given and Bradford. The speed limit is 25 miles per hour on both those roads. One of the things that we do is the speed limits are set by looking at percentiles of speed. The normal speed limit that's accepted in by just about everybody is that 85th percentile is the percentile you set the speed limit at. The 85th percentile means 85% of people are driving that speed or lower. So the 85th percentile on that street was 23 miles an hour for Given. On Bradford, it was at 25 miles per hour. It's like 25.3. So people were obeying the speed limit, so the speed limit was properly set, and people were following the speed limit. In the process of doing that, we actually counted the little road that comes behind Price Chopper. It's really an access road or a driveway that leads onto Given. And there's a 3-way stop that's there on Given Road. Now, when we went and counted all the cars, car counting and whether you can have a 2-way, 3-way, or 4-way stop is based on the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And that's something that's accepted and is in our code that we must follow it. And so when we did the traffic count at that intersection, it requires 200 cars per hour on the side road every single hour for 8 hours in order to have a 3-way stop there. Over a 24-hour period, there's only 162 cars that use that entrance. And so clearly that entrance does not warrant a 3-way stop into the back entrance of Price Chopper. So our recommendation and what we're planning on doing is removing the three-way stop and just having a one-way stop coming out. It actually, since it's a driveway, technically does not even need a stop sign, as the other entrances coming out of Price Chopper do not have stop signs, but we will leave that stop sign in place for people, so to remind them to stop right there. We will be making that change shortly. We've also found that the traffic control at Given and Bradford could be revised. We're going to do a much more thorough investigation and traffic study on that intersection before any changes are made, but we're going to review that one too. But you may notice that as you drive around, you may see that black box. It's only about this big, and so if you see it, it's got a chain sticking off it. You know that's Public Works out there counting cars. Happy to answer any questions
I
that
was
you have.
wondering how you did that when we were talking the other day. Now I know. Go ahead, Chet.
Big Brother's watching. It's not quite there, but the new car wash is going in. They're gonna let these people make left-hand turns coming out of that driveway right there by Advanced Auto Parts. That is an open invitation to get killed in that left-hand turn. You go across 3 lanes there and the speed of there. I just draw your attention to the seriousness of that left-hand turn right there. In fact, it's coming out of the gas station. People try to make the left-hand turn as well. And that's also an open discussion for how often do you want to get in a crash. I don't know what the chief has that many information that on the number of left-hand turns out there that resulted in an accident, but it concerns me that we're letting people make left-hand turns out there.
You're talking off of Bradford under Route 58?
It's coming on the 58 highway.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous situation. I just draw your attention to it.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So, when that development went in, the stop signs you were talking about, those were asked to be put in as kind of part of that plan, as I recall. I'm glad we had the study. I'm glad they can come out, but just make sure we're not crossing anything we're not supposed to be in respect to agreements. Bradford Place asked us to put those stop signs in.
I have a question. On 2 of your 3 studies, the date is the same, so how many hours was that? I mean, it says 9/3 to 9/3.
One of the studies we did for a majority of the day, and then I hooked it up for the rest of the day into the next day for the other one. So we did probably 6 or 8 hours for the first one, and then probably 20 hours for the second one.
Okay, well, the first one on this report is Price Chopper, and it says 9/23 to 9/24, which implies to me 24 hours, but you're saying it's about 6 hours. I guess.
No, I mean, on Price Chopper, we did it over 24 hours.
Okay.
On Given, we did it for most of a day, and on Bradford, we did it over a 24-hour period, is probably an 18-hour period.
Okay.
Because we're basically looking for speeds.
Okay.
Greg, were you saying down at the bottom that there's no, like, trucks, big trucks that drove through there?
On that study that you see there, it shows classification. Our unit actually doesn't capture classifications. I have to print out a different report, which gives you lengths of vehicles. And so I'd have to do a length of vehicle report for those.
Okay. I just saw both of them had zeros for all the different classes, which I wouldn't know which class. I mean, they talk about trucks driving through all the time, so I'm just trying to figure out if that was an accurate statement or not.
So on the trucks driving through there, I did speak to the one company who's working there, and I told them about that there's trucks going on that road. Of course, he denied any culpability in those trucks, had no knowledge of it. But remarkably, the day after I spoke to him, some of the residents told me the trucks have stopped. A majority of them have stopped, so.
Go
for
figure.
that, what that's worth.
Go figure. Anybody else? Jay, or where we at?
Okay.
Okay, sorry, I was
We're
behind.
almost done. So this item is talking about a rental management company. So this is in reference to if the council wanted to rent out the house on 2nd Street. And I don't know that that's what the council would like to do, but what we did is we were contacting rental management companies, property management companies, if the council did want to rent that house out. That way, city staff wouldn't be taken away from regular duties to try to lease the property, to collect rent, to do property maintenance and such. 3 property management companies in town responded to our calls, and those monthly management fees ranged anywhere from 7.9% to 10% of the rent that is actually collected. They also have a leasing fee that ranges from half of 1 month's rent to the entire first month's rent, and then maintenance ranging anywhere from $60 an hour to $70 an hour. And one of those companies said that they would charge us the actual cost of them hiring a professional contractor because they don't have their own staff. And so this is just broad. If you guys are interested, we'll do a much deeper dive and give you more information. But I wanted to tell you what we initially found and then get feedback from you.
I guess a question I would have is, since there's 5 of us new, or I guess I shouldn't say new, but 5 of us that weren't here when that was purchased, what was the plan for purchasing that?
At some point, future development.
Okay. Go ahead.
I think if you've ever been involved in rental management company is the way to go. Phone calls, collecting rent, securing a renter. You just don't want the headaches, and leave it to somebody else to have the headaches and pay them and smile all the way. It's just a better way to go, and not take the city staff doing anything that besides taking whatever money is left over after the situation. And in regard to that purchase of that property, it was hopeful that somebody would come in here eventually and purchase that property from the city and build us something worthwhile at downtown, as far as a commercial building or a residential condos or whatever the case might be. So that was kind of the thought process behind that.
Go ahead.
I don't know which companies those are. Is there a way to find out what kind of reviews they have as far as making sure that they take care of the residents that they have and all that? It would be my biggest concern.
Yes, if the council is receptive to that idea, then we'll do a much deeper dive. This was just initial to kind of gauge what your interest was. Not sure if you actually want to rent it out or, and so just to open the discussion.
I would be in support of renting it out until we figure out a plan of what we're gonna do back there.
Right, me too. Without us being involved in it.
Yeah.
Correct. I agree with Chet, having been a renter, it's let somebody else have the headaches.
Thoughts over here? There you go.
Okay, and the last item is Chief Sapp will be talking about a update on our SAFER grant status and the need that we have for additional firefighter positions.
Thank you. So, our most recognizable priority is responding to calls, and we see those calls increasing through the years. And so we talked a little bit last year during budgeting, and I had the desire to add an additional firefighter per shift to raise our ranks to 15 per day. The SAFER grant is a federal grant program that offers assistance with paying those salaries. And so we opted to not specifically write those 3 people into the budget and attempt to get that. This year, there were $355 million allotted to that grant. And unfortunately, we did not get awarded that. The competition was much stiffer Generally, it hangs around that $350 million mark, but typically it's a 3-year grant and it's a graduated grant. And so first year is 80%, I think it's 50, and then 25. This year was a little different because of COVID, and they made it 3 full years of salary. And so what happened is, instead of giving out a normal approximately 300 awards, they only gave out about 202 awards of $355 million. So what that has left us with, what do we do now moving forward? And just a little background, and so we'll probably reach about 6,000 calls. Once, 2 years ago, we actually reached that amount, but COVID has kind of played funny things with the call numbers. Right now, we're tracking up somewhere around 3 to 5%, which kind of puts us on target for 6,000 again. Around 80% of that is EMS, and so that's physically taking the ambulance out, treating somebody, transporting them to the hospital, and we find that those units are the most taxed units that we have, and that also that the increasing numbers of EMS calls is causing us to call our mutual aid partners more. If we look at just this year, we've called for mutual aid ambulances from a different city or service 135 times. So that's from January until now. And if we compare that to 2020, all of 2020 we used 136 mutual aids, and in 2019 it was 119. So we still have 2 months to go, and if you divide that out by the numbers, we're looking at reaching 180 times we've called our partners to come over and help us. And in return, this year we've given them help 49 times, specifically with an ambulance. People don't mind doing that, and we have to have that mutual aid in those kind of extreme times. An extreme example would be just last week we had 3 car accidents within less than a quarter of a mile in less than 20 minutes, and then a stroke on top of that. And so those aren't the situations we think we need to staff for, but the one thing that would happen if we can staff more ambulances is that we give quicker responses and quicker transport times for our citizens to hospitals, and then we still get to maintain that revenue. When we call mutual aid, we no longer have the ability to earn revenue from that call. Whoever transported them gets to receive those fees. With our staffing currently, if we're full staffed, and we have at least 13 people there, we'll run 3 ambulances. And just kind of doing some quick calculations, just for the first 180 days of this year, we could have ran the 3rd ambulance about 70% of the time. And so that's kind of what I've been figuring in my head, that we could run a 3rd ambulance 70 to 80% of the time. Right now, you never see us run less than 2 ambulances within the city. This additional person also, what would happen is on occasions we could staff a 4th ambulance, maybe 10 to 15% of the time. And so that would alleviate a little bit of the work on the crews, allow them to kind of do some of the other duties that sometimes we need. It's becoming extremely difficult to keep up with our training and our normal activities around the station. So that's the main reason, and I'd entertain any questions about that.
Any questions?
I would like to add that the dollars were actually included in the fiscal year 2022 budget. The dollars were, the positions were not in the account, and it's being funded from public safety sales tax dollars.
My question to you, Chief, you're adding 1 person per shift, so is that actually gonna take someone off a truck because don't you gotta have 2 on an ambulance?
Yeah, so there's always 2 on an ambulance, and it just depends on the numbers for that day. Right now, we have to operate according to CBA with the Local 42, that we operate with no less than 10 Local 42 members, and we always have a chief on duty. So our minimum staffing is 11 people. That gives 3 people on a fire truck, so we have 2 fire trucks, and that gives 2 on each ambulance and the chief. And so it would sort of depend on those days. It would be kind of a graduated kind of response. When everybody's here, we'd have 4 ambulances. If 2 people are gone, we could still run 3 ambulances. And then once we get below that, we shift them around on trucks. We'll either put an extra person on a truck.
I guess where I'm trying to go with this, because not taking someone off a fire truck is not something you want to do, in my opinion. We bought you a fire truck this year, so I think we're going to have money in our budget next year underneath that fire and safety can we work to add another 3 so we have the fire trucks manned 100% and the ambulances run?
I'm just gonna let you talk. You talk it. Let's go.
Well, I guess I'm
No,
talking to
so-
Sheila is what I'm talking to
Yeah, I
right
mean,
here,
I-
but.
Of course, if revenues allow, but
Well, I just know I know we put $600,000 away into or a fire truck this year, and that 600,000 is done. So if we have extra money in that police and fire safety sales tax, I mean, I think, me personally, I think we'd like to get to that where we're not taking people off a fire truck to put them on an ambulance and vice versa.
You're not.
Our fire trucks.
Clarify that. We're
Yeah,
not
our
doing
fire
that.
trucks will always be staffed with no less than 3 people.
We're not,
No,
yeah.
so that's a minimum for us. And the new fire truck, and so it's not, we're not buying that with the thought that now we'll be running 3 fire trucks. It's being brought in as a reserve unit so that we can rotate it in and out as we do maintenance on the other 2 fire trucks. And or in, severe weather, we can bring in overtime people and we have that available to run those calls. In my mind right now, we wouldn't think of adding more fire trucks until we're ready to add a 3rd station.
I just want to make sure that we're not, I agree, we need to have 3 ambulances running because we are using mutual aid a lot. I just want to make sure that we're not hurting ourselves on the other side, on the fire side.
No. We would, for safety reasons, we'd always want more, but we would never operate less than 3. And what we would do if we added 1 more in the future, that would continue to help assure that we now increase the percentage of time we run a 4th ambulance, and it would give us a 4th position for one of the fire trucks, which is, it's a more functional crew. Honestly, there's a lot of studies that show that 4-person pumper crews work much more efficiently and safely on the scene. So that is a goal we'd achieve, but that's not where we're at quite yet.
Well, you said that word safely, and that's what I want to make sure that we're not getting away from here.
Yeah, no, we're not. And so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? With that, we'll adjourn the work session and call the regular meeting to order. Pledge allegiance, Councilmember Clark.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Larkey,
Here.
Councilmember Savage,
Here.
Councilmember Powell,
Here,
Councilmember Trutzel,
Here.
Councilmember Kraft, Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Here.
Councilmember Peak,
Here.
and Councilmember Lawson on video conference.
Here.
We have a quorum. Personal appearances. A, Downtown Belton Main Street Incorporated. Come and state your name and all that good stuff.
I'm Chris Richardson, live at 704 Main Street. I have 3 buildings up here on Main Street, 408, 410, and 414. I'm also a member of the Downtown Belton Main Street Merchants Organization, and I'm here to tell you about our Christmas show that we have coming up. We have voted to do Christmas light show on Main Street through the November 27th through, I believe, January 8th. We are going to have the light show during the week. I think it's going to start, they're going to turn them on around 5 o'clock till 10 o'clock during the week. And then every Friday and Saturday night, I think they turn off at midnight, 6 p.m. to midnight. We have street closures on every Friday and Saturday night on Main Street. It's going to start at the Loop Road to, I believe, Chestnut. We also have a parade on the mayor's Christmas tree lighting, which is going to start, I believe, at 5:30, so the whole street will be closed. We have gotten signatures from every business on Main Street. We have 32 yeses and 1 no. Everybody's looking forward to it. Downtown Belton Main Street has spent $68,000 our first year for lights on Main Street. There's going to be a big light show at the Mayor's Christmas tree. So it is a 3-year contract. So the first year 68, I believe the next year goes to 59, and then third year 49, I believe. Every weekend we're going to have things for kids to do. We're going to have, I think the city's working with, we're going to do movies on the side of City Hall for kids. We've got stuff scheduled every weekend, which my wife has more of that information, but I know they've got a big itinerary of everything that's going to happen. So all the businesses are looking forward to it. I also have the light guys here, KC Light Pros, who's actually doing it. And I kind of want to bring them up here, let them talk about what they're actually going to do, if you're good with that.
Good evening. My name is Josh Lansdale, Casey Holiday Light Pros. So we, looking at Belton Main Street here, what we would like to do is not only just light up the City Hall Annex, and the light poles going down Main Street here. I think there's 40 of them. We also want to light up all the merchant buildings as well. We are bringing in photo ops. We're going to light the Mayor's Christmas tree, light up trees around Central Bank, down Main Street as well. And we're bringing in some other features as well, like a talking Christmas tree. There's not another one around the country, by the way. That was a surprise. Yeah, it was a surprise. But anyway, here we are. We're going to bring in a Christmas tree that talks. It's pretty cool. So we're really excited about what we can bring here to Belton Main Street and all the features as well. You guys have any questions for us?
Any questions?
So I guess my question to you, you guys talk about lighting up Main Street. What's that actually entail? You said City Hall all the way down. You're doing the residential units down on Main Street?
All the way down to Central Bank.
All the way down to Central Bank?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we use all LED lighting. It's all normal lamp cord, if you will, with sockets. Those LEDs produce a small amount of electricity. Just to give you an idea, to light up all the poles, 40 poles, City Hall and City Hall Annex, you're probably under $50 for the entire season. So it's a real low.
I think we can afford that.
Well, that plus tip. Yeah.
Plus tip?
Plus tip.
Okay. Any questions? Anybody else have any questions?
I have a couple. Can you hear me?
All right.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Allison.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think this is really going to be fun, and it's an ambitious plan, but I think that's what it takes to make it really special. My questions are, is there a reason the street would be closed until midnight on Fridays and Saturdays?
I know that I'm not 100% sure it's going to be closed all the way till midnight. I know the lights will be on till midnight. I don't know if they've got a definite answer on that, on the street closures, but the part with having the street closed is we're going to have kids up there. They're going to be walking across the street. We're doing our goal is to have a lot of kids. We're going to have some food trucks up there. We're going to have a hot chocolate truck, I think, coffee truck. And our thing with the street is we don't want kids walking out in the middle of the street having that many up there. That's why we're closing it only Friday and Saturday night. And then during the week, we will have people standing out there with donation buckets, for people to drive down the street. During the week is Monday through or Sunday night through Thursday night is basically people can drive down Main Street, get the lighting, see the lights, see the Mayor's Christmas tree, see all the lights, all the trees lit up, all the poles lit up. Friday and Saturday nights are the big for all the kids and everybody to go up there and shop. And I know they're doing a gift wrap. I think the dance studio is doing a gift wrap station I think they're also gonna have, some, camps for kids, for people to drop their kids off to do like a little dance camp or something like that. So the thing is to just bring everybody together. After these last few years, we're trying to bring everybody together, and the nice thing that I like about it is we have all the organizations working together. We got the cities working on this, we got the Belton Chamber of Commerce is working on this, we have Downtown Belton Main Street, who else we got?
BCPI.
I know BCPI,
Welfare Association.
Welfare Association, all those guys. And I don't think that's probably ever happened in this city that I can ever remember, with every organization working together to make this a big event. So that's what I like about it, and everybody's working together and everybody's excited for it, so.
That sounds really awesome. I hate to piggyback that info with my next question, but you said all but one business on Main Street signed off on it. May I ask who wasn't in favor?
That was the theater.
Gotcha. Okay. And
The
the
Main
only other
Street
question I
theater.
had was about the cost to run the LEDs. So I appreciate you gentlemen showing up with those figures. This is, like I said, ambitious, but in the kind of way that it could be really special and, kind of set a precedent. So I appreciate all the effort that's going into it.
I just want to ask another follow-up question on the timing. I know at least one of the signees, an owner on Main Street, said that they asked when it was going to start, and they said 6 p.m., and they were concerned that now it says 5, and how we'd get the streets cleared, since a lot of businesses stay open till 5, but you really want the cars off by 5, so how's that going to work?
I actually have on the form that it's 6 p.m. to midnight on Friday
Okay,
and
so
Saturday
our
night.
thing is wrong, okay.
The parade
What
starts
the,
at, I
parade's
believe,
different.
5:30.
That might be, in fact,
Yeah,
it says-
the parade is
Parade's
5:30.
at 5:30, yeah.
And then
November-
that goes straight into the mayor's Christmas
Yeah,
tree
November
lighting.
27th says 4:30, so that makes sense, the parade's starting at 5:30. But the street closings for the other weekend, Fridays and Saturday nights, I think is 6 p.m., not 5 p.m., which is a little bit different than what's typed up here for our agenda. And I guess the second question is more to the fellows putting it on. I know that you and Michelle mentioned that there's sound effects down by the talking Christmas tree. Is there other sound along Main Street, or is it primarily there?
Downtown Belton Main Street is in the process of purchasing new speakers for Main Street. The speaker system that they have up there is not good. So we are in the process of buying a new sound system. They're planning on Friday and Saturday nights, I believe during the week too, playing Christmas music through these speakers.
Meaning they're not easily heard, or that they're too
Well, the goal is
soft?
to let people hear them,
What's that?
because we're playing Christmas music, so the
Right.
goal is for people to hear them.
Well, yeah, except for businesses that are operating during that time, so.
Well, all the businesses, so we've actually talked to all the businesses that are involved in this, and the shopping, and we've got extended hours for a lot of these businesses that are going to stay open later to provide the experience, to get people in their business. And they're actually all for this. Just the one business that's not. We've actually talked about the parking also on that, and we've got plenty of parking. We've talked to you about the theater parking, and I think we've come up with a plan for that. But I can't assign parking spots for them.
Yeah,
I'm not the city. I can't close down a parking spot for them. I've suggested what I think is fair, and that's where we are on that, so. But that's gonna have to be with the city on if they can shut down a parking lot for another business that has something going on at 6:30 at night on Friday and Saturday.
Any other questions?
I just want to make clear that the city will not be shutting down. The city council may consider offering the city's parking lots, but the BCPI and Main Street, Belton Main Street would be responsible for figuring out how to block those off and and make sure that they save them. The city would not be doing that.
Right. And we've had that discussion too, that downtown Belt Main Street, we've come up with a plan for the parking for the theater, but we're not going to man it, we're not gonna rope it off, we're not gonna save the spots. If they wanna do it, I'm for it. And those are the reserved spots that we've agreed on. So, they initially wanted 40 parking spots. They wanted.
35,
Huh?
35.
35. But they were considering 3 full parking lots. They wanted the annex parking lot, behind City Hall, and Hackberry parking lot, Hackberry and Second Street. So we kind of came to the agreement of behind City Hall, behind the theater, which there's 5 spots there, and behind the carriage house. And I believe there's 27 spots available, is what we've counted. So,
Is
quite a few parking spots.
anybody from BCPI here that wants to talk?
Hi, Stephanie Davidson of BCPI, 119 Mill Street, Belton. Just quickly, it's kind of been touched on, but as the president of BCPI, our main concern was that we have enough parking for our tenant, who is Main Street Theater. And the city has been working with us on this issue today, and I think we've come to an agreement, and I believe all parties are in agreement. So that is why I signed off on the road closure, and that's all I have to report on this. So that's my piece. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I mean, I guess I have an office on Main Street and I don't have any permanent parking, so I don't know. The only people that should have permanent parking on Main Street is the city of Belton because they own their parking lots, the Chamber of Commerce, and the dog care place because they own a parking lot. And I guess I'm going to go down to the Bank of Belton. I mean, I might be missing a parking lot out there, but everything else is basically public parking. So I don't know how we're reserving parking spots for anybody.
That is, I can't reserve them. I can just suggest
I can't
what
tell
I
someone
feel.
not to park next to my building.
Right.
So I don't know how we're trying to reserve parking spots for any business on Main Street that doesn't own a parking lot.
So BCPI is in a lease agreement with the city for the lease of Old City Hall. And within that lease agreement, it guarantees parking. It's a little undetermined as there's not a number of spots
Do
indicated.
we give you one parking spot? I mean, we're giving you parking with one parking spot.
No, I don't understand what you mean.
I mean, I don't understand. You say you're guaranteed parking, but what are you guaranteed? How many spots are you guaranteed? You said it's not in the agreement.
In the agreement, it says that we are guaranteed parking. It does not specify a number of spaces. So, I mean, that's just what our lease agreement says. I mean,
I guess I'm tired of people saying that they own parking spots on Main Street.
Well,
Nobody owns parking spots on Main Street.
well, I don't think
let me
anybody's saying
clarify.
that.
Hold
Little
on,
bit.
hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's saying that.
No.
Well, that's not what I'm hearing. That's what I'm bringing up. Main Street, there is anybody owns anything on Main Street except for the city of Belton. The citizens own the streets, and the parking spots are available to anybody. If we close down the street, they're not available.
Let me just clarify one thing about Old City Hall. The lease agreement between Belton and BCPI states that meaning BCPI, has control of the lots that include the carriage house, Old City Hall, and the sidewalk between the new City Hall and Old City Hall. And it goes all the way out to the alley. To the extent that there's parking allowed, there's no spaces, but there's actually parking allowed behind the carriage house and behind, as Chris pointed out, a couple of spaces behind Old City Hall. Those have never been roped off, never been called BCPI, but that is part of our lease agreement that Stephanie was alluding to. The bigger issue is that we have for our theater, which has been scheduled since November of 2020 for December 3rd, 10th, and 17th, Friday night and Saturday night. We have, normally our customers are anywhere from 30 to, a lot of them are 80 or 90, and they, age-wise, and some of them are handicapped. And I've been talking with Chris and Michelle, and like they said, they worked out some things. But the point is, you're absolutely right. The city can take away all the parking on Main Street, even though when Jim Brown was here, and I'm sure Dave would require us to do it too, when we went for a certificate of occupancy, we were required to go out and see how many handicap spaces and how many public parking spaces were on Main Street to serve our customers. And we didn't own them, but we were required to enumerate how many there were for the population of our audience. And so you're absolutely right. We don't own any of those spaces, but we just made the we just made the kind of assertion that if all the parking is taken off of Main Street for people to walk, then the people that are going to drive here and walk, they're going to take the places in the and rightfully so. They're the public. They can park behind City Hall. They can park in the Annex parking lot. They can park in Janet Lee's parking lot. And so I guess we will just not have a play that night or those 6 nights. I don't know. But that was that, and people have been gracious enough, particularly Norman and Stephanie and Chris and Michelle, to arrange this. But if the city wants to go ahead and say, oh, well, we don't want anybody to have any reserved parking spaces, even for handicapped people, that's your prerogative.
I mean, my only question, personally, I don't think Rob should be involved in this conversation because he owns a business on Main Street that's directly affected with it personally. So, I wasn't involved in the 353 because of the same reasons. I think this is where we get into that. I think there's a conflict of interest on this personally. But that's
I'm not
up to the
voting on
attorney to
anything.
decide.
I'm not voting on anything. In fact, if there is a vote, I'm abstaining. But you'd asked a question, and I thought I should just clarify what the lease agreement says, and what we went through to get this to get our certificate of occupancy.
But I would say the same thing to the downtown Main Street merchants. The people show up, parking's parking. Go find it, park it, and it's first come, first served. It's city parking lots.
So I think we're going in circles here, so let's circle back to the original request of
Right, what we're doing. I'd like to make
Posing.
another comment on this, that my wife did a street closure the beginning of the summer for her recital that she did. We had probably 300 to 350 people that showed up. We also got a call from Councilman Powell about us taking their parking spots. So he came down to my house, we talked about it, and he basically told me that some of my people took his handicap parking spots. And I was like, you can't tell one handicapped person not to park in another handicapped person's parking spot. My wife does a class for special needs kids, and those kids have handicap stickers, So to come down there and tell us that they can't park in his handicap parking spot, and then, I don't think that's right. And then basically told us that he was going to change the policy on how to get a street closure so that you not only had to ask your block, but you had to ask the other blocks on either side of your street closure. And I asked him, I said, if I had to do that, would you have voted? Would you have okayed mine? He goes, I don't know. So he's kind of using his city council seat to tell me or tell my people that they can't park in these certain spots. And I would rather him come to me and say, hey, what can we work out? And I'll do whatever I can to work it out, but both sides have to give a little bit, I understand that you have older people and we're good with roping off some spots, but I can't okay that. That's the city. But I'm plenty good with it. I just think the theater should have to rope it off and manage that. I don't think downtown Belton Main Street merchants should have to do that.
All right, back to your original request.
So I would note that today, city staff and people from BCPI and Main Street talked. I have prepared a motion that I believe encompasses the thoughts and discussions that were had today by everybody involved and gets us to the best result possible. It's a motion approving the street closure requested by Downtown Belton Main Street, Inc. for the dates and times listed in the application and presented to the City Council on October 26th, 2021, subject to Belton Main Street, Inc. and Belton Community Projects coordinating the supervision, access, cordoning off, management, security, and safety of certain parking facilities owned by the City of Belton that may be utilized by Belton Main Street, Inc. and Belton Community Projects, Inc. during the relevant time period. I would note that as part of that motion, it is parking facilities, meaning the city-owned parking lots, not city streets, just for clarification based on Councilmember Clark's discussion previously.
I mean, I'm good with that, making that motion if that's.
We have a motion. Second. Any more discussion? Go ahead.
So the streets are gonna be closed off, and people are not gonna be able to drive down them, so they can't park on the street, correct? Is that not correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so everyone, since they can't drive down, they're gonna have to park. So we will have limited parking due to the streets being closed down. And so we're asking everyone to park either on Loop Road, on the streets around Main Street, in the two city parking lots on Second Street, the annex if it's available. So, I don't know, I guess I'm just,
We do it for Fall Fest. I mean, I don't think I'm gonna add to this.
yes, but we're taking, I mean, if
We're
they're
not taking
using,
any more parking than Fall Fest does. They're not. I'm not involved in it, but,
but the annex, a lot of people park in the annex parking lot, a lot of people park,
well, they can still park in the annex, cause I don't think, where you guys closing the road down? At Loop Road here?
Loop Road. That's every
the-
Friday and Saturday night. Now, the first Thursday, November 27th, the Mayor's Christmas Tree,
Saturday.
it's Saturday. The Mayor's Christmas Tree, that's gonna start, I believe, at Hackberry because we gotta do they're doing the parade.
right?
To set up to come down Hackberry and go down Main Street. Every Friday and Saturday night past that, it's going to be Loop Road to, I believe, Chestnut.
Okay, so if I come up here at 6 o'clock on Friday or Saturday night, I can go and park anywhere I want to that's open, is that correct? If that means the annex, or if that means behind City Hall, I can park there.
Subject to potential future actions of the City Council in designating parking spots in those relevant parking lots. And the management of Main Street, Inc. and Belton Community Projects, Inc.
Any other discussion?
I just think we gotta shut it down, they gotta shut it down at Loop Road to give people who come in, there's no parking, it's a one-way street, so they gotta have access to get out,
Yeah,
so.
you gotta keep Loop Road open.
Yeah.
Yeah, Loop Road will be.
You gotta keep the access point open, yeah. Yeah. All right, any other discussion? Seeing none,
She wants a comment.
We have a
uh,
If it's relevant to the current discussion of the motion of closing the road and doing the two parking lots.
It is.
okay, go ahead.
So my question is, in that motion, are we speaking about just this one event, or are we speaking about all future events for road closures? Because Fall Festival would have the same exact issues?
The current motion only deals with the relevant time periods of the street closure for this event.
This event only, or these dates in the request.
But obviously, city-owned facilities are subject to the city council's decisions regarding management, control, access, and all those other things.
But the vote for this motion is on this event only?
Yes.
Thank you.
The dates stipulated in the motion. Seeing none, roll call, please. Or is it voice? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Where you at? Yes or no, Allison? You're behind.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries.
She came perfectly in at the no.
Yeah, she was behind.
And I'm Steve Smith, by the way. My partner didn't let you all know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you leave, Steve, we have the second motion that we still need to approve,
We do.
or the second item, rather.
Is that now?
Number B, letter B. It was not specifically addressed in the above conversation.
Do we gotta make a
we
motion to
gotta make a
allow them to
motion for
plug
B.
into our city streets?
Correct. It's just for.
Is that perfect? I'll make a motion to allow them to plug into our city streets.
Best motion I've heard all night.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. I think
Have a
she's
great night.
I think she's a yes.
That 3-second delay.
All right, consent agenda, one motion, non-debatable, to approve the recommendations noted. Any member of the council may ask for an item to be taken from the consent agenda for discussion and separate action.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Regular agenda, a motion approving the final reading of Bill 2021-59.
An ordinance of the City of Belton, Missouri, amending Chapter 2, Division 4, Personnel Code, Section 2-558A, Legal Holidays of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Belton, Missouri.
We have a motion and a second.
I didn't hear the second.
Oh, probably because we didn't get one, my bad. We have a motion. Now we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mayor,
Yes.
I would. On the last time we spoke of this, I voted no, and I think I would like to explain why. It's
Okay, go
nothing-
ahead.
Nothing to do with the event. I think that, we can recognize things without having to make it a paid holiday. One more holiday will be the 15th in the city, which is virtually 3 work weeks of the year. As a small businessman, I know if I had 3 work weeks of the year with holidays plus vacations for my employees, it would be difficult to run the company. So I don't think everything has to be a holiday. What I would like to suggest, if we're going to have a 15th holiday and for 3 weeks in the city, I would love to see something like the first Tuesday of every November be a holiday, which would benefit everybody so that you could get out and vote on the day that you should be voting. So I just wanted to explain why I said no, and I'll stick to my conviction on that.
Understood. Any more discussion?
I mean, I think Perry brought it up that the only 3 people that voted no were 3 business owners, and understanding the ramifications of just what it costs for us to give people days off and understand that. I mean, unfortunately, I see 1, 2, 3 people here tonight that I think were all retired, so there is no holidays for those people. Every day is a holiday in my world for retirement, right? But yeah, I don't know if Allison gets that day off with her company or not, but I mean, yeah, it's just nothing to do with the actual holiday. I just think 15 days in a calendar year is a lot when you have some people that I think could have up to 5 weeks of vacation, Sheila. So they can have basically 8 weeks of paid time off. I mean, again, as a small business owner, it's hard for us to do that ourselves. So that's, I mean, I'm with Perry on exactly that. I think we have to give them so many hours for vote, but, so.
And that's after 20 years of service, so.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mayor Larky,
Yes.
Councilmember Savage,
No.
Lawson,
Yes.
Trutzel,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Clark, Goff,
No.
and Peak.
Motion carries. B, a motion approving the final reading of Bill 2021-62.
An ordinance of the City of Belton, Missouri, amending Section 9-78, time for filing declaration of candidacy of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Belton, Missouri, to conform with changes set out in House Bill 271.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please. Oh,
First reading.
oh, my eye, something in my eye. Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? Motion carries.
Move for a second reading.
We have a motion for a second reading
Second.
and a second for a second reading. Any discussion? Go ahead.
I think the only reason I'm moving for a second reading, this is something that is done by statute and not something that we're doing ourselves, so I don't know why we need to continue it.
I agree with that. Any other discussion? Oh, this is just on the motion to amend, or
Second reading.
Motion.
second reading. All right. Seeing none, roll call. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? Motion carries. B, a motion approving second reading of Bill 2021-62.
An ordinance of the City of Belton, Missouri, amending Section 9-78, time for filing declaration of candidacy of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Belton, Missouri, to conform with changes set out in House Bill 271.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mayor Larky,
Yes.
Councilmember Lawson,
Yes.
Trutzel,
Aye.
Savage,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
Clark,
Aye.
Goff,
Aye.
and Peak.
Aye.
Motion carries. C, a motion approving the first reading of Bill 2021-63.
An ordinance of the City of Belton, Missouri, calling for and establishing the date of the general city election for municipal officers to be held on April 5th, 2022.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please. Or, I'm sorry, dang it, I'll get it down. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All against? Motion carries.
Motion for a second reading for the same reasons, Mayor.
We have a motion for a second reading.
Second.
And it's second. Any discussion on the motion for a second reading? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All against? Motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2021-63.
An ordinance of the City of Belton, Missouri, calling for and establishing the date of the general city election for municipal officers to be held on April 5th, 2022.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Savage,
Aye.
Powell,
Aye.
Peak, Trutzel,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Goff,
Aye.
and Mayor Larky.
Aye. Motion carries. D, motion approving first reading of Bill 2021-64.
An ordinance calling an election in the City of Belton, Missouri to authorize the issuance of general obligation bonds for streets and roads.
Present. Second.
We have two motions and 2 seconds.
There you go.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, or, dang it.
All in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. E, a motion approving first reading of Bill 2021-65.
An ordinance of the City of Belton, Missouri, amending Chapter 3, Intoxicating Liquor, of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Belton, Missouri, to conform with changes set out in Senate Bill 126.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. F, motion approving first reading of Bill 2021-66.
An ordinance authorizing an agreement with Missouri Department of Social Services Family Support Division.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I ask her for more information on this.
Go ahead.
This ordinance would allow citizens inside the city to actually participate in this low-income household water program that is being administered by the Missouri Department of Social Services. And it would allow for families to get up to $750 for water and sewer user fees and charges. And for residents to be eligible, they must be responsible for actually paying their water and sewer bill and have $3,000 or less in their bank accounts, retirement accounts, or investments. And so these are people that could really use this help. This program will be going through September 30th, 2023, unless funds run out before then. And West Central will, and the Department of Social Services, they will be notifying all the residents in the city that are eligible for this program.
Go ahead.
A couple questions for you, Sheila, on this, if you know the answers. $750, I mean, that's a monthly fee, or is that something as an annual fee that they're allowed to get?
Up to $750 one time for the entire duration of the program.
So I guess my question to you is, on a resident, if they need assistance, how quickly can this happen? Because I don't know what the time frame is, because my water bill comes out electronic funds, so I don't know when I get it, my bill, and when it comes out, when I pay it. So how quick of a turnaround do they have to pay someone's water bill before it gets turned off, is what I'm trying to go with.
What they will do is they will actually send a pledge, just notify us that they are good for the funds, and then we will use that information to keep that customer's water and sewer service on, because we know that we will be getting a check from Department of Social Services.
So the residents could actually use this, what you're saying is every month, up to $750 a month?
If DSS pledges for them. So DSS would notify us that they are pledging X amount, and we keep track of that, and yes.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. G, a motion approving the first reading of Bill 2021-67.
An ordinance authorizing an access agreement with the Port Authority of Kansas City, Missouri, Port KC.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or any information? That's you.
Not that much information. This is just an agreement so that we can use some of the old barracks out at the old Air Force Base. We've been doing it for years now. It's just a requirement that we have so that we can make sure insurance is covering properly and such as that.
When are you
The
doing
reason
that?
it's coming to you guys, this is an internal document that we designed, but it's coming to you guys because it's an agreement with another governmental agency. Typically, if I was dealing with a private citizen or a business, the city manager has the authority to sign that.
He asked, when are you gonna do it?
When are you trying
Are
to
you
do
gonna
this?
try to do it?
Well, it's ongoing. They must be maybe getting closer with plans out there. Typically, when we do this, I've done it for up to 2 years with them, but they've shortened it down to this entire contract will only last through April, I believe. And so it's not a one-time plan. It's just that it's there and available. We'll go out and conduct sporadic training as time allows.
And this will take care of that whole for that whole time period, right?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. How soon do you need this?
Motion for a second reading?
We have a motion for a second reading.
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. She's scaring me up there.
She's confusing Andrea, I
I
can see
know.
that. like, she
Motion
keeps
approving
voting.
the second reading of Bill 2021-67.
An ordinance authorizing an access agreement with the Port Authority of Kansas City, Missouri, Port KC.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Lawson,
Yes.
Savage,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
Trutzel,
Aye.
Peak, Clark,
Aye.
Goff,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey.
Aye, motion carries. H, a motion approving resolution 2021-81.
A resolution approving the engagement of Baker Tilly US LLP to conduct an executive search for city manager.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion carries. City Council Liaison Reports. You're up.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
I saw her on this.
Okay. The Parks Department has the Pumpkin Palooza coming up this Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. at Memorial Park. This will be outdoor games, music, and hay rides. Businesses and organizations are handing out candy at the trunk or treat that'll be going on simultaneously, and it's free for everyone to attend. Other park news, I don't know if folks have noticed, but High Blue Wellness Center underwent a rebrand, and we had staff working really hard to make that a success. So now it's referred to as High Blue. It kind of focuses on all the offerings, aquatics, recreation, community center. So appreciate the efforts there, and that's all I have for parks.
Go ahead, Councilman Clark.
October 18th, Planning Commission, they approved the sixth phase of Tradition Single Family 57 lots. And they also approved Bronson Manor, which is a one-lot plat at Belray and McKinley. That's what they did.
Pretty simple, actually. So, any other council communications or liaison reports? Man, I gotta stop, I guess. Mayor's communication, I don't really have any. I know we're working a lot on the mayor's Christmas tree and the lighting and the Main Street Christmas stuff. I think it's gonna be good. I hope everybody can come out and attend and enjoy it. So that's all I have. City manager.
The first thing is just a quick question for all of you. We're working on our budget requests, and I would like to know how many of you use your city-issued laptops. If you have a laptop that you use regularly, please raise your hand because it's time for those to be upgraded.
Don't use it here, but I use it
Okay.
everywhere else.
Perfect.
I just use it at these meetings, except for tonight.
That's perfect. I don't want to use money that isn't necessary, but if some of you prefer or iPads, and so, okay. So there were 3 laptops, and I will talk with Councilwoman Kraft. So the next thing I just wanted to tell you guys was that the November 23rd meeting is being moved to November 30th, and just in case one of you doesn't read your agenda, I didn't want you to miss that. And then we got word that we did not receive the recycling grant that the city applied for. And so what that means is I will be gathering information to bring back to you at a future meeting, talking to WCA about the possibility of curbside recycling. And if any of you are interested in additional information, please reach out to me so that I can gather all the information that you would like to discuss at a future work session, probably after the first part of the year.
Was there any reason why we didn't get the grant? Or did they stipulate why we didn't get the grant?
They said there are 3 things were that grant funds are only allocated on an annual basis, that several budget line items were not eligible, that we submitted were not eligible for district funding, And then that the committee was curious as to why the city was going to develop a drop-off center when the survey results showed that residents preferred curbside recycling.
Okay, thank you.
That was their comments. And
I
then,
understand that was 450 residents that responded and not 24,000?
well, they were actually who funded our statistically valid survey. So I believe that they embraced the results from that survey. And then, Carolyn, do you?
Let me back up just a couple seconds. Allison, I didn't pay attention to whether you needed a new computer, you use your computer or not.
I don't. I'm good, thank you.
Okay, all right, go ahead, sorry.
So yes, as Councilwoman Lawson stated,
You're not on.
can you hear me? As Councilwoman Lawson stated, the Pumpkin Palooza, so the city is going to have a trunk at that
Absolutely.
event. So we welcome all of City Council to come and pass out candy if you so choose. And that, as Councilwoman Lawson stated, is Saturday the 30th from 6 to 8 at Memorial Station. And then one plug that I'd like to make regarding the mayor's state of the city is actually 2 weeks from today. And that is going to be held at Memorial Station on Tuesday, November 9th at 11:30, and the public is invited. If anybody would like to attend, please RSVP, and I'm speaking to the general public, to the Belton Chamber, which is chamberbelton.org or .com.
And then, Dave?
I do have this one item. Meadow Creek is a planned unit development that was approved by the City Council in 2018. It's a PUD with 43 duplex lots and 39 single-family lots. It includes a overflow parking lot and a pool and a clubhouse. Construction is underway at Meadow Creek Phase 2 at this time, and the developer has asked that their consideration be given to maybe changing the amenity in the PUD from a pool to a dog park, a playground, and a sport court. Now, our code allows minor changes in approved planned unit developments, and a minor change can be approved by the Director of Planning. I do believe that this is a change that is probably positive because the dog park, the playground, and the sport court would be 12-month amenities that people could use throughout the entire year, where a pool would only be available for 4 months of the year. So I believe that that was a reasonable change in terms of the activity centers and that amenity. I discussed that with the Assistant City Manager and the Mayor. They concurred that it was a reasonable change to the PUD, and we just wanted to bring that forward and advise the City Council.
Any questions on that?
I have no, I'm not opposed to it, but I just want to make sure that you put in there that they're going to maintain that. Not just put it in, but they have to maintain it. If they got a dog park there, they got a kid saying you got broken toys, whatever the case may be. So we'll make sure that they keep it up.
Yes, sir.
Because that's the problem with the swimming pool, is keeping it up as well, plus the cost and danger of it. So anyway, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And Chief Lyons?
Shortly after I was sworn in as the police chief, I conducted one-on-one meetings with the men and women of the police department and also stakeholders and even former employees. And I learned that the majority of our employees wanted to aspire to excellence, and so they also had an overwhelming desire to serve this community in pursuit of a new mission. And the members of the department desired to begin a new chapter for the police department in appearance and philosophy. And to that end, the women and men of the police department are looking forward to a uniform change that takes us away from looking like other law enforcement agencies in the Kansas City, Missouri area. And the new mission of the police department is to reduce crime, increase traffic safety, and enhance quality of life of all citizens. And we're dedicated to preserving the constitutional rights of every citizen. And with that, we are dedicated to this community. And so on the new patch, you will actually see that we have the motto, dedicated to community, while upholding ourselves to the highest standards of integrity, trust, and respect. And on our new badge for the police officers and even command staff and even myself, you'll see the values of integrity, trust, and respect are actually on that badge, which is kind of unique in law enforcement to have that displayed there. We are committed to displaying these values in order to build relationships with the citizens and other stakeholders in pursuit of our mission. And these new patches that you see will also have an anniversary version, is what is actually in your packet that was passed out. And it celebrates the 150 years of this community, which starts in January. And so that patch will be on the uniform on both shoulders of our police officers for this year. There is a standard version that will be on, we'll use for patrol car decals, that type of thing, in the future that we'll have here shortly. And those will also show up in displays, awards, apparel, our website. This week, the police department will be posting a new mission statement and motto along with the image of our new badge and patches. And we look forward to those changes. As the uniform goes, the officers selected a new Class B type uniform. It's a duty uniform. That's what it is. And the majority of the consensus was LAPD blue. And we are also designing new graphics for patrol vehicles that we'll do in the future. It's not going to be all at once. It'll be phased in over a period of time. If you remember back earlier this year, we had that community survey that came back from the community in regards to visibility in the community. And it was low in residential, business, and parks. And one of my former agencies that I worked for, we had a similar situation where we were low in that area. We worked very hard. We thought we had a number of plans where we changed the types of activities that police officers did, and we only brought those numbers up very slightly. Unbeknownst to us, we made a change with the patrol car to a black and white. And when we did that community survey the following year, the numbers shot up almost into the 80 percentile. In fact, we were higher in respect to that than any of the other communities in Kansas City that did that same survey, and that included Johnson County, Kansas. And so we're looking forward to changing our cars to black and white. It'll be a white vinyl that just covers the door panel, and then new graphics. It won't be substantial in cost. Again, we're just going to be phasing that in over a period of time. Another initiative that we're going to be breaking forward with is traffic safety. Is always the number one concern of any police department, and it's no different here than Belton. And the number one complaint that we hear from citizens regards traffic safety. And so we're looking at our process at which we take those complaints, how we process those. We're redesigning that process. And the police department is going to be rolling out a Drive Like a Neighbor safe driving campaign. We've actually been working with the local business to help us design that. We'll actually use it on our social media posts. And there's a sign that will be available to the public in the next couple of streets, and they can put that in their yard to help maybe their neighborhood bring more attention to safe driving, speeding in the neighborhood, that kind of thing. And so along with this, we'll be doing, some of our staff will be doing some feature vignettes, just small, social media posts about traffic issues like texting while driving, speeding, red light running, distracted driving, etc. So we're looking forward to that, and that's always really kind of cool because it's just not me doing some of them. It'll be officers that you might not see but have a lot of technical knowledge in regards to traffic safety.
Thank you. Any thoughts or concerns on that? Anything else? Any council communication?
Mayor,
Go
I would
ahead.
just like to real quickly say, I think what the BCPI is doing is really nice. I think the theater in Belton is really nice. I think those are two great assets that we have, and I hope that the parking situation can be worked out amicably between everyone, because I think it's good for the town. And
I just
Thank-
wanted to
thank
say
you.
two things. One is, I want to give a big shout out to the codes enforcement group led by Dave and Brittany and Jeremiah is the other one. And anyway, if you notice, if you go down Mullen away from Hy-Vee, the trees on the sidewalks have been cut back. The brush that's been there for at least 6 years, I know, on Mullen by traditions, has been wiped out. So, and that's very important for people walking on Mullen, because if their car is pointing towards you and you're walking in on the side of the road with no sidewalk, now you have a place to jump in case they don't yield. And also on South Cedar, the trees. But the big one, which has been all summer, got Norman involved and a lot of other people, is the Given pond or pool or whatever, which is now visible from Given. You can actually see it. All the growth has been cut back. And just one personal thing, and Chris said it right, but I just want to make everybody sure. I never, ever went to any handicapped person and said, you're not supposed to be parking there. I've never, ever approached any handicapped person, whether, I haven't even challenged that they're handicapped, let alone try to get them to move their car from any place. So I was talking about parking spaces, not people actually parking in parking lots, in parking spaces.
Anybody else?
move to adjourn?
We have a motion to, and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned.